What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I'm coming at you with the Spike Stripe from Premium Collection 2020. His name is Great Hero Villain Verminous, which is a very strange name if you think about it, because he's a great hero, but his tagline is villain. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but here we are. And his skill says auto Vanguard, of course. When the attack of your rear guard on a circle with the force marker does not hit, call Soul Blast 2, turn a card from your G zone face up, and draw a card, and then call a card from your hand to rear guard circle. So I think it's best for me to tackle the skill kind of like going from top down, kind of giving my thoughts and some interaction and stuff like that along the way. Activating when your rear guard does not hit on a force circle comes from the bull spike camp of skills, which I think is pretty interesting, and that they're trying to tie those two things together. However, it doesn't give you the advantages that bull spike does, because bull spike allows you to draw a card and then retire one of your opponent's units if the force circle attack doesn't hit. Verminous here is kind of all about trying to finish the game or put your opponent in a position where they don't want to block, because then you can just keep the attack chain going. And then by extension of that, the Soul Blast 2 to call a card from your hand comes from way back in the Miracle Ace camp, in that it allows you to multi-attack for Soul Blasting out some cards and calling a card from your hand to an open rearguard circle. This one doesn't say open rearguard circle, but it's in a similar vein. You are able to call over the unit that previously attacked. That way you can keep the chain going, which is a welcome addition, because you don't have to manually clear the circle out the way, so that you're not forced into using charge stuff, which I think is a pretty cool implementation of the skill. And I'm sure something you've noticed about Verminous is that the skill is not once per turn, which is kind of what I was alluding to with the Miracle Ace comparison, in that you aren't forced to do it once per turn, but you are able to draw, so that you're not beholden to have to refill the cards in your hand through like your drive checks or something. You're able to fulfill the skill by just drawing off the top of your deck, and then maybe find a better unit to call over the ones that are currently in your hand. So it kind of is a self-sustaining combo, which is a kind of a welcome addition in my opinion. And a big omission is that you might notice that it doesn't require a counterblast. So it finally gives Spikes a method to multi-attack that doesn't require you to have counterblast open to function. Because something I've previously run into a lot of times in Premium is that I use my counterblast a lot for a previous turn to try to combo out, and my opponent lives by one way or another, and it comes to my upcoming turn, and now I suddenly don't have counterblast to use, so I can't use any of my other strides. And up to now, before Verminous, when it came to trying to finish your opponent off that might be low on hand or something, if you lack counterblast, and Spikes were pretty much just kind of sit and duck, kind of a fish out of water, so to speak, because then you're kind of stuck with the units you have in hand or on board, and you can't really find ways to get those attacks you need to push over the top. Verminous here kind of puts a change to that, in that you can use the soul you've accumulated to be able to finish the game off and beat your opponent down with the cards available off the skill and everything like that, which I think is kind of nice. It's something I really wanted for Spikes for a long time for that very reason. And Verminous being able to accelerate your G-Zone count for Hellheart 8 is pretty cool. And since you draw a card before calling a card from your hand, it allows you to fish for heals or PGs to be able to live your opponent's next turn, provided that you are able to get your opponent in a position to want to guard the attack that's on your force circle. However, if your opponent does not guard the attacks from the force circle, then you're putting more damage on your opponent, which means that you're not able to accelerate your G-Zone count for Hellheart 8. So you're winning, but you're not leading to that in-game strategy, which means that it may not be, it's kind of an anti-synergy in that respect. It does open the door for some of your other strides potentially to win the game on the following turn if you push your opponent with a Verminous and bait them to not guard the attacks. From the aspect of Hellheart 8, there could be a potential anti-synergy there to look out for. So keep that in mind as you're playing the card. And I'm sure something that's going to be on people's minds as they watch this video or when they first saw Verminous is, what force gift does it support more? And to me, the answer depends on the situation that you're in, as it is the case with most Spike vanguards, or force vanguards for that matter, because Verminous himself doesn't grant power, which means it might make Force 2 harder to use in some situations. And of course, it's obviously good if your opponent is at 4 damage and you can just keep beating them down with repeated Force 2 attacks, but you need to have units in your hand or in your deck that you can draw that benefit or gain power themselves to be able to help continue to put the pressure on your opponent. If you don't have a deck with a lot of those units, then it might be better to go Force 1. That way you can get the power and then maybe put yourself in a position to beat them down a little bit later than you would with a Force 2 attack. So it all kind of depends on your deck construction and what your the situation of the cards in your hand presents as you go into Verminous. And since Verminous is a Vanguard that requires Soul to function, you might be asking yourself, how can you get cards in your Soul to be able to Soul Blast them out later to be able to use for the continuous call for him? And the best ways to do that are, on the V side of things, the Bracky trio. So Bracky, Wonder Boy, Juggernaut, Maximum. In that beginning of main phase skill, you can put them into Soul, search out a copy from your deck, and put it into play, which means you just continually buff up your Soul. Gyro Slinger also is a good card in that regard, and Ronaldo, because it all put cards from your hand into Soul to get some top call benefit. So you might find the Bracky, Juggernaut, Wonder Boy to be able to keep that chain rolling. And to me, that's probably the fastest way, because I saw a lot of success with that in Standard. Trying to do other particular Soul-based combos. So I kind of have the idea that it will still be good in this situation if you wanted to abuse Verminous. If you don't want to look in the V-Series stuff, then if you go back into the older cards, you have cards like Medical Manager that could put cards into your Soul. Deadly Mason, which in my mind is an inferior Ronaldo because 9k power and all that jazz. And if you want to get kind of funky with it, then you can also use cards like old Skydiver, and then a nice little fun interaction with an old Forerunner in Fierce Leader Darkbringer, because like Skydiver, if you combine it on your Force circle, then regardless of the result of the attack, you're going to be able to put it into the Soul, or you'd be able to Soul Blast out some cards and then call over top of it to continue the chain rolling. So if you have a healthy Soul and maybe a supply of Skydivers in your hand, then you can continue to chain call regardless of the end result and put that pressure on your opponent, which I think is a nice little fun interaction. Some other cards that came to mind is some crits. So you have like old Silence Joker that can push in the Soul to unflip. And the previous, I think they came in Premium Collection. The previous Premium Collection crits. That's hard to say. Say that 10 times fast. That go in the Soul once you're at GB1 in your Vanguard attacks to draw yourself a card. And that works well because it powers up Verminous himself. And since Verminous triggers on your rearguard attack, you can attack with him first and get the benefit from the card going into Soul and drawing the cards. And you might fish for some better units to use as well. Similar to Skydiver and Darkbringer, the idea behind those is you want to put your opponent in a position to where they feel compelled to block if you want to try to trigger Verminous. Of course, they're going to be compelled to block if they're at 5 damage and they're getting ready to die, or 4 damage and you're on a Force 2 circle. But a card that came to mind is Thaddeus, because if it's on the 4 circle and it hits, your opponent has to retire. Unfortunately, you don't get like an extra draw benefit from it like that. But if they have an important rear guard that they want to preserve, then they're going to be more compelled to block Thaddeus, which means you can use Verminous to call something else out that also might be potentially dangerous to hit, which, if you remember some of the old charge support, you have Cobalt Impulse, which if he hits while charging, you draw a card and retire one of your opponent's rear guards, which is a nice little 1-2 interaction if you're able to trigger an attack to not hit and call out Cobalt Impulse through Verminous. So Verminous is a nice way to trigger charge like old Miracle Ace was, because then you can still get the charge benefit from it. So nice little fun thing to do there. It is kind of difficult if you're trying to combine the charge support, say Ryzen, for example, until we get, since they are reintroducing old V-Series stuff into Standard, you're likely going to be able to see a Force Ryzen in the future, which might revive some of the old charge support with it, because you also get the 4 circle to go along with your charge units being able to come back as well. So that's something to look out for as a future proof for Verminous here, is that Ryzen could be coming back with it, or could be coming back in the future. And another important interaction to remember is that if the unit that's attacking on your 4 circle is removed, say like from Denial Griffin, before the resolution of the attack, then you can't trigger Verminous's ability, because then the unit is no longer on a 4 circle upon the attack resolution. It is kind of strange conceptually, but it is how the rule works. So if you're facing against an opponent with a Disruption G-Guard and you're on Verminous, just keep that in mind, that you want to have ways to circumvent that, or maybe not want to use Verminous in that situation if that particular G-Guard is live and able to be used against you. So keep those things in mind. So where does Verminous fit in the grand scheme of things? And to me, Verminous fits into a niche role that Spikes have been wanting for a while, which is if we needed something that we could go into if we have no counterblast to use, or if we're in a position where we don't have a good board, but we can't go into something like Picaro, for example. And the reason for that is because we needed a way to multi-attack while being low on counterblast, like I talked about before. And up to now, Spikes have been lacking that, unless you were in a position you could go into Hellheart 8, which pretty much did the job by himself. However, if you're in a position of having a counterblast to work with and you have a pretty decent field or pretty decent setup in your hand, then you're likely going to get more mileage out of Agrius than you would out of Verminous, because to be able to trigger Verminous, your opponent has to not allow the attack to hit, which is a lot harder to achieve than it is to just counterblast one with Agrius and being able to get a chain attack off that way. And to kind of put it in perspective, Agrius in most situations can grant you 5 attacks for 1 counterblast. To achieve 5 attacks through Verminous, you need to have stand triggers in your deck and you need to activate, or you need to have 4 cards in your soul, which may not always be easy to achieve up to that point in the game, depending on game flow, of course. So you don't have to as readily build around Agrius as you would to need to be able to build around Verminous. So it's a lot easier to achieve Agrius through jumping through less hoops. And a lot of the most successful decks in Premium get you a lot of mileage and a lot of benefit for less hoop jumpiness, I want to say, kind of like less effort involved. Like, it's very easy to put the pieces together to be able to beat your opponent down with those pieces. So hope that all made sense. And if you have a counterblast to use and you're in a position to kind of need some push through power, then you can also go into Violence Ace, because Violence Ace can do the counterblast skill, unlock the rest of his ability. Well, provided you don't need to have additional counterblast for the call ability, but you can use your soul that you might have massed and spread 40,000 power, for example, across your board, as opposed to trying to get additional attacks off if worse comes to worse. So it's all just a little bit setup dependent. And that's why, to me, I feel that Verminous falls into like a nice 1 of, maybe 2 of role for Spikes, just because it's more of a niche option to me than it is a primary win condition. Because all those things I talked about previously of being, you have to build around it a little bit more, might be a little hard to achieve the soul necessary to make it function. And there's probably better strides in situations building up throughout the course of the game where you'd rather go into those over Verminous, but you still want to have it in your G zone in case you need it. So kind of the idea of keeping your G zone as like a Swiss Army knife of options more than anything. So Verminous isn't exactly like a world beater, but to get use out of Spikes, it really doesn't have to be. And that's perfectly fine in and of itself. So that'll do it for me. Those are my thoughts and opinions on Verminous. Let me know your thoughts and opinions as well down below. I look forward to hearing from you. But yeah, that'll do it for me. Until the next one, peace. Be easy.